issue of Video Fashion News brings you the Fall 2016 collections that are sprinkled with fairy dust. It's sweet dreams and wondrous clothes at Alexander McQueen.
It was completely magical. Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen just entered a fairy tale land of exquisite clothes.
Once upon a time, Victoriana, goth, and Lady Gaga met at Marc Jacobs.
Marc is one of the few designers left that lives in an alter reality. It's about fantasy. It's about putting on something and escaping to another world, another dimension.
During the winter season, you'll live happily ever after in Marchesa.
It's just very princess fairy tale-like, and I hope that's not cliche, but I feel like everyone always wants to look their absolute best.
Take a whimsical walk in the park with Thom Browne.
Walk in Washington Square Park in the 20s.
The museum at FIT, enchants with Fairytale Fashion.
The Altuzarra Red Riding Hood is spectacular.
And much, much more. Returning to London after years of showing in Paris, Alexander McQueen designer Sarah Burton cast a captivating spell and made ethereal dreams a sublime reality.
It was completely magical. Sarah Burton for Alexander McQueen just entered a fairy tale land of exquisite clothes in every possible respect. Color, shape, detail, embroidery, from the hairdo, which was embellished like Queen of the Fairies, down to the tips of the ostrich feather shoes. It was completely sublime.
It was the first time in years that McQueen has been back in London, and certainly the first time ever that Sarah Burton has shown a McQueen collection here. But it was really more of a continuation of that fantasy, dreamlike, ethereal quality that she put forward in the spring collection. It was much darker, and there was a pretty strong lingerie vibe running through the collection. When you added to that the motifs of lipsticks, lips, butterflies, there was this kind of playfulness that you don't really associate with the house, and much less of the darkness as more of the romance. So it was a new direction.
There were elements of tailoring, but they were always softened, perhaps with a jeweled bra, and there was just overall a softness, which I think is something she's been heading towards, over the last few seasons.
They had a lot of those beautiful glittering gold capes that matched the sheer dress underneath. I thought that was a really beautiful look. And I like the motorcycle jacket that was over a sheer skirt. That was a big trend of the season, lingerie look with a heavier jacket on top.
McQueen for me was like Midsummer Night's Dream, but the sexy fairy that was hidden behind the trees. I mean, it was exquisite. I loved the fantasy of it. I loved the whimsy, but still it was very wearable, very clever, and much more fluid, much more feminine. I adored it. I adored it. I adored it so much. It was light. The detailing was exquisite. The embroidery was sublime, honestly. And then when she came out in the little ostrich-trimmed duvet, you were like, maybe I can go home and customize my own. No, but it's like, it was so magical. I loved it. I loved it.
I think Sarah being a woman, and also she's about to give birth sort of virtually within a week, I think perhaps motherhood and femininity is very much on her mind. It was a very romantic collection, very soft and extremely feminine. It was totally fabulous.
The faithful arrived, eager to enter the extraordinary world of Marc Jacobs. He set out to transport guests to his unparalleled universe with a romantically brooding aesthetic.
Oh, I love my look. I love my makeup so much. It really suits my style.
I love it. I think it's so different, and you know, it's really cool. It's kind of pushing the edge, and it's like a little bit of goth, and it's really dope. I really like it.
It's incredible. He's like the showman. He's like, you know, every season's a different idea and a different journey. You know, the collection is like all about exaggerated shapes and these amazing things coming together. And so the set to him, it was more about an idea of clarity, an idea of purity, kind of in this environment, how the girls would look, you know, with the bells ringing and this kind of white, pure environment, almost like a very calming effect.
Marc is one of the few designers left that lives in an alter reality. It's about fantasy. It's about putting on something and escaping to another world, another dimension. And I think that is what he does so beautifully, is that he takes that alter reality and that fantasy world and he puts it on Earth. And, you know, it's a lot of women also just want to feel like when they're wearing something that they're not themselves anymore. And that's something that money can't buy. He stands alone in terms of the pinnacle of the creative geniuses of his time.
Well, when I saw Lady Gaga, I think everybody around was like, is it her, is it not her, is it her, is it not her? And then I sort of felt like they all looked a little bit like Victorian little monsters, especially with those, you know, great shoes and the kind of extreme looks. And I thought it was, it's a very beautiful show. And Marc does what he does so well. It kind of does whatever he wants, and it looks so beautiful and just really poetic. And I thought it had a kind of a little monstrous vibe to it.
I really like my outfit. My outfit is gorgeous. Like, the heels are amazing. I think it reminds me about Tim Burton movies, you know. I'm wearing a feather jacket, and so, I don't know, a little bit gothic, but at the same time so gentle.
You know, it just felt such classic Marc Jacobs. I mean, it was a little bit kind of Limelight, Club Kid, Beetlejuice, Wuthering Heights in a weird kind of way. And you know, it was super, super, super dark, but he just does things in such a sweet way. So even when they're super dark, it's dark in a way that like we all feel like we're, 14-year-old girls writing in our journal.
It was amazing. It was so gorgeous. He's probably one of the designers I buy, instead of borrowing, because I love his pieces, and they're classics and they last forever, and they're usually like really cute.
Quite a magical show. It was very impressive. It was like a piece of theater, and I think there were like some surprises. It was very unique, a great way to close the New York Fashion Week.
New York's museum at FIT ventured into the woods for their exhibition Fairytale Fashion, showcasing magical runway creations from designers including Alexander McQueen, Marchesa, Rick Owens, and many more, to depict beloved stories like Sleeping Beauty, The Red Shoes, and Snow White.
I really love fairy tales. They had been a subject of fascination for me really throughout my entire life. I really began my work by reading some of the early written versions of tales by people like Charles Perrault, who wrote the version of Cinderella that includes the glass slipper, also the Brothers Grimm, Hans Christian Andersen, and I noticed early on that a lot of these tales have these important references to fashion, even if they're kind of vague, like a gold dress covered in jewels. So I started pulling those ideas out of the tales and thinking, how would I illustrate these using actual fashion objects? I've wanted to include a lot of fairy tale characters, but I've also in some cases used clothing to illustrate a concept, like the idea of the rose as a symbol of love, which works its way into numerous tales. One of the tales I've included is Little Red Riding Hood. We have an example of a red woolen cloak with a hood from the late 18th century, and those were actually fashionable outer garments worn by women during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. The Altuzarra Red Riding Hood is spectacular. I had only seen that piece from the front in runway images, but when it arrived, it's all embellished with Swarovski crystals, and it has this gorgeous long train, and it's really the ultimate high fashion example of the Red Riding Hood. The sea covers two tales, The Little Mermaid, which is the Hans Christian Andersen tale that we're all familiar with, and also a somewhat lesser known tale called The Swan Maidens. I think particularly in the fashion world, the idea of a mermaid gown has been so important. So I have examples by Charles James. I also have a brand new example by Rodarte, which you see behind me. In Andersen's tale, the Little Mermaid is so fascinated with the human world, and her grandmother says, well, do you realize that your most beautiful asset underwater, your tail, is considered disgusting by humans? And I found that really fascinating because there are so many mermaid dresses in fashion. We clearly don't find mermaids disgusting. Alice in Wonderland is really fascinating of all fairy tales because when it was originally published, it included these gorgeous illustrations by John Tenniel. So I've included a waistcoat that actually has some of those illustrations woven into its pattern, and also included numerous motifs. There's this kind of iconography of Wonderland that includes things like little golden keys and playing cards and pocket watches, and once those things all come together, they definitely read as Wonderland. What I love about Cinderella is it's truly the ultimate rags to riches tale. I've included 4 sort of rag-style dresses, but they're all high fashion. They're all really beautiful. We perceive this kind of ragged clothing very differently today. I've also, for her ball gowns, included a gorgeous gold couture dress by Christian Dior and a really beautiful silver 18th century inspired ensemble by Vivienne Westwood. I've represented Snow White in a really beautiful hand-painted Dolce & Gabbana gown. It's hand-painted with white roses. And the Thom Browne pieces represent Rose Red. It's this gorgeous suit that has this applique of red roses. And my very favorite is a man's suit by Thom Browne that includes a bear-shaped headpiece by Stephen Jones. So the tale shows this transformation. A prince is turned into a bear, and then he, at the end, goes back to being a prince. I was particularly excited about The Wizard of Oz because reading the novelette shows that Dorothy was actually really obsessed with fashion. She changes into her crisp blue and white gingham dress before she heads on her journey to Oz. She gets a new green dress in the Emerald City. She's obsessed by her silver shoes, which of course are represented as red ruby slippers in the film, but there's this real preoccupation with fashion that was fun to trace. Fashion and fantasy is a really fantastic contrast to a lot of what we're seeing today, which is an emphasis on globalism and functionalism and technology, all of which are hugely important. Of course, we all need clothing that we can wear day to day, but I think having something in contrast to that that shows up so well on the runway and really awes people in fashion editorials is incredibly important.
Backstage at Marchesa for winter 2016. We were inspired about the portraits back in the days, and we wanted to recreate a look that it was quite effortless but yet very sophisticated. And we create a bit of sophisticated retro chignon in the back, you know, part in the middle, pull back, covering the ears. We did a bit more macrame-like style, emulating the days back in the days. Marchesa is all about sophistication and really haute couture. So I think the hair really give you the right accent to make the collection even to be better.
I just thought Marchesa was so gorgeous. I mean, every bit of it. I mean, they really brought John Singer Sargent to life. I mean, everything from the hair, makeup, the gowns, obviously, and just the way it moved was beautiful.
it's what we come to fashion shows for, to be mesmerized, to experience a dream, and to see clothes that are superlative. And I think that Georgina Chapman and Karen Craig have captured this moment of romanticism, but a little eclectic and a little eccentric, kind of piling on more is more when it feels like you want a little bit of opulence in your life.
I loved it. I love supporting other designers, and Georgina and Karen are really good friends, so I was really happy to finally be able to make it to one of their shows.
Speechless. Beautiful, beautiful collection, always. I love all the gold. I love all the chantilly lace, the delicate with like the stones. Everything was so beautiful. You can always find show-stopping pieces when you come to one of these shows.
The idea of this robust burst of blooms that we're seeing all over blouses and skirts for daytime, and how they did it so exquisitely for evening, and then just encrusting the bodices with gems and jewels and crystals and pearls and more, and many times having it become jewelry that was attached to the dress, and then with the addition of a choker around the neck. I have to say, I'm loving all these chokers we're seeing this season.
Oh, it was amazing. I was just telling them I loved it. It's always incredible though. And he's so romantic, just very feminine. It was a beautiful collection. I saw so many that I loved. I can't wait to get backstage to see them again.
That it's just very princess fairy tale like, and I hope that's not cliche, but I feel like everyone always wants to look their absolute best, beautiful, and you also want to feel like what you're wearing is art. And I feel like every single piece that comes out the runway, you wonder how it's made, who created it, and how many hours that took.
I hope that all of those dresses end up on the red carpet. Hollywood, you need to listen. Stylists, you need to listen. We don't need to see cleavage that's down to a belly button. We want to see beautiful women that are feminine and that are confident, and those clothes were exactly that. And those were glamorous clothes. That's what you turn on the Oscars for. That's why women go to galas. That's why they have events in their life, because that's what they want to look like.
Looking to the classic 1927 Fritz Lang silent film Metropolis, as well as the surreal illustrations of Victorian women in nature by Italian artist Daria Petrelli. Delpozo creative director Joseph Font imagined fantastical silhouettes with magical embellishments for fall.
First of all, it was my first Delpozo show, so I was blown away with the talent Joseph has. I mean, it was a sculptural masterpiece with beautiful embellishment, incredible craftsmanship and workmanship. I was touched by his presentation, absolutely touched. I think he's a big talent.
Well, I thought it was incredibly beautiful, beautiful workmanship, very unexpected colours and embellishments and fabrics, everything we sort of expect of Josep, really. It's great. I think it's a gentle evolution, really, isn't it? I mean, from the very first collection, certainly that I saw, there's been a focus on amazing workmanship and construction and bringing a very kind of couture approach to ready-to-wear. And I think, you know, every season he's just kind of refining that.
I'm just so excited. I mean, the thing is that you are immersed in his world from the minute you get here. You know, you're coming down the stairs, it's a garden. You're always given a surprise and you're always transported, and I think that's what captivates us as, you know, jaded fashionistas that trawl in the snow to get from one show to the next, you know, for sure.
Walk in Washington Square Park in the 20s, really the 20s through the 30s, so it was really the introduction of how women wanted to create new clothing out of the clothing they already had. They were all taking classic pieces that the woman had in her wardrobe and creating one piece out of all of those, like a jacket with a skirt and a coat all in one. A lot of beautiful silk tulle and a lot of work with fabrics. This collection.
A bit of a 20s feel there. And interesting too, where he was deconstructing a lot of the men's looks, he over-constructed, I felt in many ways, the women's looks. Jackets looked like they were sliding up the shoulder, but were actually trompe-l'oeil and they were a complete coat. Training, backs of dresses that were actually trousers, and jackets that were tailored sartorial pieces became skirts. So great whimsy, though it was in a very serious setting, but there was a lot of great whimsy to the clothes.
Thom Browne brings endless imagination, intense thought, a cerebral outlook. I mean, he thinks very hard and very deep and very conceptually. He creates these whole worlds, these whole universes, not just in a setting like this, but in a stitch, even in a button. That's why I like wearing his clothes.
It's always fun to see what Thom does. The idea of a lot of those great little puppy dogs that became handbags and all the little dogs that became the interesting little appliques on a lot of the pieces were not a surprise, and I was happy to see that they continued forward.
Him as a stole, him as a bag, him as embroidery, him as a wheelie bag, yeah. He made a lot of appearances. Yeah, those little box bags, and, you know, doing things that, you know, making things really specially, but they have a little bit of whimsy to them, and, you know, especially at that level, to do something that's not so serious. And so, yeah, there's a lot of really important accessories in the collection.
I love a Thom Browne show. It's part fantasy. There's always great clothes that customers want to wear, but I also like the high drama that he brings to it. It's what you come to a fashion show for.